Watcher, part of a secret society of men and women who observe and record, but never interfere.
In the world of the Highlander series, we meet a multitude of unique characters. But in this video, we're gonna take a look at an organization that is relatively unnerving. Let's go into the Watchers. Let's get to it. Immortals in the Highlander franchise fight wars that last centuries. But somewhere in the background, there has always been another force quietly recording everything they do. That group is called the Watchers. And today, we're diving into their origins, how their system actually works, and how a group built to observe slowly became something much more complicated. Let's find out together, shall we?
So you can hunt us?
No. We observe, we record, but we never interfere.
Who are the Watchers, and why were they created in Highlander lore? In the lore, the Watchers go all the way back to ancient times. The story says the Watcher organization was created by a man named Amaletu the Akkadian, the first Watcher, after he saw the immortal Gilgamesh literally come back to life. Imagine witnessing that in the ancient world. No science to back this up, no explanation for why it could possibly happen, just a man you thought dead was suddenly standing up again and going about. But instead of freaking out or trying to kill him or something, Amaletu decided that he was going to study this. I kinda feel like I would do the same thing in his place though. I would definitely be curious about them and what they would do. And that decision basically started the Watchers. From that point on, their job was very simple in theory. They watch Immortals, write everything down, and they never interfere. Sound kinda hard, right? To just watch things from the sidelines and never interfere in anything would definitely be a hard task. They knew about the game, they knew the rules, and they tracked Immortals across centuries very quietly. Their big plan was that only after every Immortal was gone would they finally tell the world that Immortals had walked among them this whole time. Now, here is where things get a little interesting. Around 904 BC, Methos, the oldest Immortal in the series, actually discovered an early version of the Watchers. Because he lived such a low-profile life for so long, people thought he was just a myth. So he was able to slip inside their organization without them realizing who he really was. I do not know how I would feel if I were in his situation. To know that there are a bunch of people out there just watching people like me silently would make me so paranoid. But this guy probably felt nothing of that sort. He even married a Watcher named Ruth during that time. Later in the 16th century Italy, he met his own personal Watcher, and instead of seeing him as an enemy, they actually became friends, which already goes against the whole idea that the Watchers never interfere. Over time, a few other Immortals found out about them too. Talus discovered the Watchers and started killing them, which is why Duncan MacLeod had to stop him. And through Duncan's friendship with Joe Dawson, Amanda and Richie eventually learned about the Watchers as well. But for most Immortals, they never knew they were being watched at all. There is that moment in Highlander the Source where Joe says the Watchers are basically gone in a ruined future world, but that movie's place in canon is debated. What's really important is this. Early on, the movies made it seem like no one knew Immortals existed, but the TV series changed that idea completely. It revealed that some humans had always known, quietly and secretly, for almost 4,000 years. They were there in the background the whole time, taking notes while Immortals fought and died. And honestly, that is what makes them creepy. It's not because they are powerful warriors, but because they have been watching everything from day one.
I probably know more about you than you know about yourself.
Do you?
How is the Watcher system actually built? So the more I looked into the Watchers, the more I realized they are not just some bunch of people watching Immortals for fun. They are actually a very old organization with a proper structure. At the very top, you have something called the Tribunal. You can think of them as the three people who run everything. They make the final calls for the entire order. Originally, these three were just chosen by other powerful Watchers, not voted in. But after something called the Galati Affair, everything changed completely. A guy named Jacob Galati went rogue and brutally killed a bunch of Watchers during Joe Dawson's planned execution. This moment basically disrupted their whole system, and after that, the Watchers decided that tribunal members should be democratically elected instead. Which seemed like a better idea anyway, right? Always better to do that instead of letting a bunch of powerful people pick. Below the tribunal, you have the geographic leaders. These are the Watchers in charge of different parts of the world, basically managing everything that is happening in their region. Under them are the field operatives, and honestly, these are the people you probably picture when you're thinking of Watchers. They follow Immortals from a distance, blend into crowds, take notes, and report everything back. These people are literally the eyes of the organization out there in the real world. But here is something I found really interesting about them. Not all Watchers are out there in the field. The Order has different divisions like history, special operations, and research. And honestly, a lot of the Watchers actually prefer to do research over fieldwork. They are people buried in archives. They preserve ancient manuscripts, decode records, and keep centuries of information organized. Which kinda sounds like a fun job actually. I would love to do that. Their biggest tool is something called the Active Roster of Immortals, which is basically a constantly updated list of known living immortals. So when you step back and look at all of this, the Watchers are not just neutral observers. They are this huge, complicated system with politics, power struggles, and secret divisions, and even groups that completely reject their mission. And honestly, the more I learn about their structure, the more interesting they became to me.
No circumstances was he to reveal our existence to Immortals.
Why the Watchers struggled to stay neutral? Unfortunately, not everyone connected to the Watchers actually follows their rules. There is a rogue group called the Hunters, and unlike the Watchers, they do not want to just observe the Immortals. They want to wipe them out. They see immortality as something unnatural and evil. This group was originally started by James Horton, who happened to be Joe Dawson's brother-in-law. His hatred for Immortals came from being assigned to watch the Kurgan in the 1980s, which clearly messed him up in a huge way. Also, like I already said before, some people like Ethos, or even Duncan for that matter, do end up becoming friends with some Watchers. So the question does arise, can they even be neutral in that scenario? I personally believe that true objectivity is not something that exists in the first place. We are all products of our society, our upbringings, and our preconceived notions. The way we look at the world is shaped by countless other factors that we might not even be consciously aware of. In such a scenario, neutrality does seem like a myth already. If we add on to this, where some of them are actually having interactions or being friends with certain Watchers, takes away the idea of neutrality even more. I kinda think that the minute they make contact, neutrality just goes away, even if they do try to be objective and neutral in their jobs.
Look, if you change your mind, I'm Joe Dawson.
Thanks.
Joe Dawson, the Watcher who became Duncan MacLeod's friend. If you guys want to understand just how fragile the Watcher's whole idea of watch and never intervene is, there is no better example than Joe Dawson's case. Joe is one of the few Watchers in Highlander who actually breaks that rule because he simply cares too much. Joe did not start out with the Immortals. He was a Marine, he lost his legs in Vietnam, and was just aimless until a Watcher named Ian Bancroft explained the world to him about the Immortals, the game, and the whole hidden history. That gave him a new purpose, and he threw himself into the Watchers with everything he had. Eventually, Joe becomes the Watcher assigned to Duncan, and the way that relationship evolves tells you everything you need to know about how human empathy can undermine Watcher rules. At first, Joe tries to stick to his training and stay in his place, but pretty quickly, he begins to admire Duncan, not just as an immortal subject to record, but as a person, someone who cares about mortals, tries not to kill for pleasure, and actually has a moral life outside of the game. So Joe soon starts helping out Duncan, warning him of dangers sometimes, or giving him some info that could help. Basically, he ends up breaking protocol for his friendship. This is something that the Watchers never assumed would happen. He is even put on trial by the Watchers for betraying his oath and being too close to Duncan, when a bunch of Watchers are killed by another Immortal and they even find him guilty, even when it's not his fault. Eventually, he ends up leaving the organization because he believes that he cannot continue to stay and be friends with Duncan. But Duncan ends up asking him to stay so he can make sure that the organization does what it is supposed to do and acts altruistically. So he ends up becoming the head of the Watcher activities again. Is knowledge the Watcher's main weapon? The Watchers mainly rely on knowledge. As I said before, they know who the Immortals are, even if those Immortals have changed names and identities for centuries. They track where they go, who they meet, who they fight, and how they live. They write everything down, even things Immortals would probably rather leave in the past. Over time, this turns immortal lives into records more than stories. Dates, locations, duels, deaths, and relationships. It all ends up somewhere in their archives. For Immortals like Connor or Duncan, their lives are emotional and complicated. There's love, loss, mistakes, and things they carry for hundreds of years. But inside Watcher records, most of that just becomes timeline entries and reports. Whole lifetimes get squeezed into documents. And since the Watchers are the ones keeping these records, they also decide what gets remembered and what doesn't. If something isn't written down, it basically disappears from their history. And if something is written in a certain way, that version sticks. In some cases, they probably know habits or patterns about Immortals that even the Immortals themselves stopped noticing a long time ago. And that kind of information can be dangerous in the wrong situation. If someone inside the Watchers ever decides to interfere, they would already know where an Immortal usually lives, who they care about, and where they tend to go when they disappear. They could predict movements, track identity changes, or even expose an Immortal to the world if they wanted to. Even small things matter. Knowing which cities an Immortal avoids, how they react under pressure, or who they trust can be used against them. The Watchers are not fighters, but information like that can still put Immortals in danger, especially if it ends up in the hands of someone like the Hunters or any rogue group connected to them.
You're out of the Watchers?
Maybe it's too late. Maybe it's about time.
Can the Watchers be corrupted, infiltrated, or transformed into something darker? We already know one major case of this happening with Ethos, so I want to focus on all the moments when he actually got tangled up with the Watchers, because honestly, his relationship with them says a lot about how vulnerable they really were. It starts back in 904 BC in Jerusalem, when he overhears people talking about some Immortals he recognizes. That takes him into a meeting where he meets a Watcher named Ruth, falls for her, and slips into their ranks under the name Alexander. And what is kind of funny here is that the Watchers, an ancient, all-knowing organization, basically had no idea who he really was. Ethos had kept such a low profile for so long that their records barely mentioned him. So the oldest Immortal in existence ends up working inside the very group that claims to track Immortals. He becomes deeply involved with them, learns more about the game from the inside. But when Ruth dies, everything falls apart for him, and in 825 BC, he walks away from the Watchers entirely. Centuries later, in the 1500s, while living in Italy, he forms another secret bond with a Watcher who even keeps a private journal about their friendship, something completely against their own rules. Then in 1984, he resurfaces again as Adam Pearson, studying ancient language at St. Aidan's College in Durham and joining the Watchers as a historian. And here is where it gets almost comical. He graduates 6th in his class, rises through the ranks, and by the mid-90s he becomes the lead researcher on the Ethos Chronicles, meaning he is literally put in charge of finding himself. At one point, he even jokes that he makes sure that never happens. If that does not scream that the Watcher system is flawed, I don't know what does. After the Galatea affair, he helps build their immortal database with Don Salzer, but eventually his cover as Adam Pearson collapses and he is listed as AWOL. So in many ways, Ethos does not just infiltrate the Watchers, he exposes how easy it is to manipulate them. And then, just when you think they are complicated enough, you get the Eye, a rogue cult born from a former Watcher named Idema Naru, who left in the late 90s or early 2000s, and no one took her seriously. The Watchers only managed to infiltrate them once, and that agent is sent back in pieces, which tells you exactly how far gone this group really is. What we know about the Eye is terrifying. They take an Immortal named Nabila, place a metal collar around her neck that protects her from decapitation, but also turns her into a walking nuclear trigger. If that collar is destroyed, a bomb goes off. And when you compare that to Sanctuary, where the Watchers were drugging and imprisoning immortals for the greater good, you can see a pattern. Both groups claim that they are just doing things to protect humanity, but both are willing to commit a bunch of horrifying acts to do that. If you look at things this way, the Eye is not just one random mistake. It seems like a dark side of what the Watchers themselves could become. Do the Watchers have a form of reproduction? How does the organization continue? So, if you're wondering how someone actually becomes a Watcher, the honest answer is that the show never gives us a neat step-by-step recruitment manual, but it does give us enough concrete details to understand the process. What we know for sure from the canon is this. First, people do not just apply to the Watchers like a normal job. The Order clearly selects people themselves. Throughout Highlander the series, Watchers are shown as already embedded in society before we ever meet them, which tells us recruitment is controlled and deliberate, not open. Second, there is formal training because the Watchers have an actual Watcher Academy. We know this is real because Mythos, living as Adam Pearson, graduates 6th in his class of 103. His ranking only makes sense if there actually is a structured program with tests and evaluation. Third, the show clearly divides Watchers into field operatives and research operatives. Field Watchers follow Immortals, observe them in real time, and report back. Research Watchers work with archives, chronicles, and databases. Both roles are shown repeatedly across the series. We are also told that new Field Watchers are usually assigned to safer Immortals first, meaning less violent or unpredictable ones. Based on how the Watchers operate, it makes sense that they quietly identify potential recruits before ever approaching them. Many Watchers that we meet come from an academic, archival, or research-adjacent backgrounds. This kinda suggests that the Order favors people who are already skilled in observation, record-keeping, and all that. But this is only just a speculation. Every new recruit is another person who carries the same way of thinking forward after older Watchers die. So, in simple terms, you don't join the Watchers. The Watchers decide that you belong with them, train you, and bring you into a system that will outlive you. How does mortal limitation shape the Watchers' morality? One of the things that bothered me about this whole thing is the imbalance between the two groups. Immortals get to have centuries of time. They watch empires rise and fall. They outlive everyone they love, and they keep going. But the Watchers, they're just normal people. They age, they get sick, they lose friends, and eventually they die. Some Watchers probably wish they had even a fraction of that time, especially when they dedicate their entire lives to studying Immortals they will never truly understand. Some might even look at these Immortals as walking history, people close to even gods maybe. But if you spend your whole life watching people who never age, never fade, and never experience the same limitations you do, it's hard not to feel bitter about it. And that is basically how groups like the Hunters are born. When you think about that, it changes how you see their morality completely. They are standing next to beings who might live forever, knowing that their own time is incredibly small in comparison. And I think that would mess with anyone. The Watchers do not just casually study Immortals. In a way, their organization becomes their version of immortality. And that is, honestly, what makes them so creepy to me. They are temporary humans staring at eternity, trying to understand it, control it, record it, and sometimes even contain it. Their ethics are shaped by that gap between what they are and what Immortals are, and that gap never really goes away. Also, these people have limited time. They get maybe 60, 70, a maximum of 80 years if they are lucky. Just imagine knowing your life is short, and instead of traveling, loving, making memories, or just living normally, you dedicate decades to following and learning about someone who will be around long after you are gone. You are basically choosing to be a shadow in someone else's story, one that does not really seem to have an end. And I keep wondering how they justify that to themselves. Do they really tell themselves that their work is more important than their own life? Do they feel like watching Immortals gives their existence meaning? Or are some of them secretly bitter, knowing they are pouring their best years into studying people who will never fade the way they will. Imagine yourself in that situation, seeing this contrast up close. It has to mess with your head. You are constantly reminded that your time is slipping away while theirs is not. So, in a way, being a watcher feels less like a job and more like a sacrifice. They are giving up pieces of their own lives just to document someone else's. And that is what makes me uncomfortable about them. Not because they are evil, but because I don't know if I could ever bring myself to live like that. Spending my life obsessing over people who get to live forever feels tragic. What are the ultimate limits of the Watchers as an organization? When you take a step back and think about this group, they don't seem really untouchable. They have lasted for centuries, but I keep wondering how long a secret like theirs could really survive in the modern world. With technology, surveillance, and information everywhere, could they actually stay hidden forever? Or would the truth about Immortals eventually slip out no matter what they do? Then there is their claim of neutrality. They say they only watch, but can anyone really stay neutral for that long? After generations of observing life and death, could that line slowly blur? And what about the Immortals themselves? If enough of them ever decided the Watchers were a threat, could they wipe the organization out? Well, the possibilities are always there, and the Watchers have, of course, broken their own rules over time. And with that, guys, we have come to the end of yet another fun video. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you guys think about the Watchers? Would you ever want to be a part of this group? On the other hand, if you were an Immortal who knew about their existence, how would you react to them? Let us know your thoughts in the comments section below. If you enjoyed watching the video, do remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more. Thanks for watching, and until next time.